Okay, well, perhaps we can move on to the last segment of our discussion, which is this obscurely entitled intertextuality,
Hmm.
which doesn't reveal much of what's going on. So, what are these texts and what is going on here? Why is this such an important subject that obviously you explored in your recent postgraduate studies at the University of Oxford?
Indeed. So I was always interested in the similarities and the differences between stories in the Quran and the parallels in biblical tradition. By biblical tradition, I mean not only the canonical biblical writings, but post-canonical writings also. So, the writings of the church fathers, the Talmud, and Jewish traditions, Second Temple writings, etc. And so, how do we explain the similarities and the differences? And over the past 2 decades, at the very least, a lot more scholarly material has come out, which is looking at the similarities and the differences of, various Quranic accounts against the biblical backdrop. And so, I've been interested in this topic also. And I've looked specifically at a few accounts. So this would be the story of Moses in the Quran, the story of Jesus. In my thesis, I focused upon the story of Zechariah, and also one element of the story of Moses, that would be Moses's separation and his reunion with his mother. So when he is, still a baby. And my personal conclusion on my examination thus far is that it seems that the Quran intentionally parts ways with commonly known stories which are to be found in the Bible, which are to be found in biblical tradition also, and that the Quran has its own perspective. And it really, doesn't care what someone else is saying. It is just putting forth its own view, and it wants people to accept that as the correct view. At the very least, the stories which I've examined, that would seem to be the case. And
So
yeah,
the tradition used to be, and you still get some Christian missionaries who say this, that the Quran is a crude cut and paste job of the Bible, basically, and it gets it wrong, makes mistakes. But there are differences between the Bible and the Quran. The Bible being the default position, of course, which is true and right. The Quran just makes mistakes when it differs from the Quran. But you're saying that that whole crude paradigm is just gone. And I know your supervisor at Oxford, Nikolai Sinai, has, in his most recent work called The Quran, A Historical Critical Introduction, also says that in the introduction to that book, that paradigm is now gone in Western scholarship. And now, as you are explaining, of course, that the Quran has its own view and is polemically engaging with the stories, be it in the scriptures, the people of the book, other stories, and telling them and correcting them, perhaps, or giving its own version of these stories, with an understanding, of course, that what the Quran is saying is the true understanding. It's not just a different view; it's the view, the truth about what really happened. In those stories, the Quran is asserting itself over these other stories and giving the truth with a capital T.
Yes, indeed. And so my intertextual reading has definitely led me to that conclusion. And as far as the polemical view is concerned, I wouldn't say that it's completely gone, but it has received a very significant dent, and it is rather diminished. So you will come across, obviously, purely polemical circles where such views are still circulating, according to which the Quran simply is the product of copying from the Bible. When it comes to the, scholarship, on the other hand, so critical academic scholarship of the Quran, this view is seldom championed by scholars. There might be a few individuals here and there who may say something along these lines, but really it's not at all a mainstream or a common view. And the reason is not because scholars suddenly developed this need to be nice to Muslim and to respect the Quran. It's just that as many scholars began examining the parallels in more detail, they realized that some of these, in fact, a lot of these polemical paradigms, they are really very difficult to sustain. And I can give you like one example
Please.
of this. So, uh, in the Quran, there is the story of the Annunciation to Zechariah. Zechariah is praying for an offspring, and God accepts his prayer. And then Zechariah asks for a sign, and a sign is given to him that he will not speak for 3 days and 3 nights. And it's a very happy occasion, and it's a very positive account. If you look at the parallel in the Gospel of Luke, Zechariah is informed about his son. He is given details about this son to be. And then Zechariah, like the Quran, requests a sign. The angel becomes angry and says, I am Gabriel. I just gave you this news. And, you are still asking for a sign. And I'm just very loosely paraphrasing. And then the angel says that, for your disbelief, you will not be able to speak. And he is basically, his punishment is that he is struck mute. So it's a very, very different story. You can see the sharp contrast with the Quranic account. In the Quran, Zechariah asked for a sign. He is gladly given the sign, but the sign is a punishment in the of Luke. And if you look at the subsequent church fathers, in my thesis, I had a look at maybe around close to a dozen, I think, fathers. This includes, the Syriac church father, Saint Ephraim, and various others, Origen. And so, they consistently carry forward the story of the Gospel of Luke, and they simply add some complementary details to it. They expand it in a complementary fashion. And in some of these fathers, in Saint Ephraim, for example, Origen, and a few others, the punishment of muteness that is basically inflicted upon Zechariah is taken as a symbolic separation between Christianity and Judaism. So it is almost as if that the punishment of Zechariah is a symbol of the replacement of the Jewish temple or the Jewish system of worship by something new, i.e., Jesus, and the new, system ushered in by Jesus. Now, when you look at the Quran against all of these various parallels, not only do you notice a sharp contrast between the main story that punishment of Zechariah, there is no punishment in the Quran. In fact, it's a blessing, it's a sign, it's a positive thing that is granted to Zechariah. But also in the Quran, Zechariah's son, Yahya, or John the Baptist, is introduced as the heir of the house of Jacob. So the continuation of their inherited religious tradition is very clearly implied in the account. Zechariah and then John the Baptist are legitimate heirs of the house of Jacob and of their inherited religious tradition. Jesus does not replace that. Jesus does not end that. So continuation versus a discontinuity that you come across in the writings of the various church fathers. And you come across...
What's interesting for me is that you get the sense very much from contemporary historians of the New Testament and Christianity and historical Jesus. The consensus appears to be that Jesus didn't come to establish a new religion called Christianity. That he was a Jew preaching Judaism to Jews. Yes, he had his own particular take on Torah observance and perhaps an intensification of observance and terrorization, perhaps a great emphasis on love, mercy, and faith, and so on, but certainly not establishing this new religion called Christianity, which pretty quickly came on the scene towards the end of the first century, for sure, with people like Ignatius of Antioch, who actually explicitly refer to that. So it seems that the Quran is in agreement with that view, in as much as Jesus is seen, and John the Baptist, of course, is
Yes.
seen as people who were very much within Second Temple Judaism and operating and teaching accordingly, as opposed to the idea of a new religion being born, which is arguably understood by the early fathers, exegesis of Luke chapter 1. So that's an interesting, multifaceted way of looking at it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you come across, other points of contrast and differences in this Quranic account of Zechariah, which is mentioned in Q19 and Q3, Surah Al Imran and Surah Maryam, and these various biblical traditions. But you come across the same thing in different stories, different prophetic stories that you examine. I mean, just looking at the story of Moses, there is one interesting example that I was actually not familiar with up until my studies at Oxford. So you'll notice that the sign given to the miracle given to Moses, one is that his staff transforms into a serpent, and the other one is that his hand becomes leprous. The Hebrew term in Exodus, I'm forgetting what term it is, but you look at the meaning and it has a negative connotation, that his hand becomes, like diseased or infected when he pulls it out. And when he puts it, in his bosom and takes it out again, it becomes normal. So, that's a miracle which is given to Moses. Interestingly enough, when the Quran mentions this particular miracle, the hand miracle, the Quran refers to it 5 times. And on 3 occasions, the Quran says that his hand was white, without disease, without defect. So you see, again, the contrast, with that detail in the Bible, because that word, if you look at the concordances and the dictionaries, it's a negative word. I mean, the translation oftentimes is disease.
Okay, you've established the difference, but why is the Quran making that point? So it's not a random point. Oh, incidentally, you just have a diseased hand. Why is it saying this so significantly?
Yeah, so again, the question is why, as you said, the Quran says this. Now, if you look at the post-canonical, Jewish writings, you may be able to glean maybe, some difficulty with this nature of the miracle. So in Exodus 4:6, in the Septuagint, for example, it simply states, his hand became as snow. And Josephus mentions, for example, his hand became white, of a color resembling chalk. Now, they're not disagreeing with what is there in the canonical Exodus. They're simply emphasizing the whiteness of the hand, and they're just leaving out the bit about the disease. We may guess that, okay, they were uncomfortable with that, although you can give it a positive spin also, that his hand became very leprous, very diseased, and then in an instant it is healed, and that is a miracle. And it shows that I was reading somewhere that that the control of God over Moses, and that some people are trying to show the superiority of Jesus compared to Moses. I'm just vaguely recalling some things which I read quite some time ago. But nonetheless, in these Jewish writers, you can see that there is simply an emphasis in some of them upon the whiteness of the hand, and the hand becoming resembling chalk, as Josephus. But the Quran goes out of its way to mention in 3 places it was without defect, without disease. What is the reason for that? Maybe the Quran just disagrees with that and thinks that it was white, it was not diseased, not defected, and that is wrong. Because it is wrong. I can't think of any other reason at this stage as to why that is the case. But there is something else also, again, in the story of Moses. In Exodus, we read about the famous duel which Moses has with the magicians. And the magicians are able to replicate a miracle of Moses, but Moses prevails. His serpent, I think, gobbles up or swallows the other snakes. Now, the same story is mentioned in the Quran. Now, there is the Quran disagrees with Exodus in the order. in the sequence of what happened. So according to Exodus, if I remember correctly, it is Moses who first throws his staff and it converts into a snake, and then the magicians are able to replicate that. In the Quran, Moses invites the magicians to cast their staff or whatever they had first. So they did it first, and something happens. The Quran calls it trickery, or somehow they fooled the people, but it seemed real. And the Quran mentions that Moses became afraid, that within himself, like he was concerned, that he was not expecting this at all. And at that very moment, God tells Moses, don't be afraid, you will prevail, cast your staff. Moses does that, and immediately what happens? When the magicians see the miracle, they just fall in prostration. They know that this is the real thing. This is not, akin to what they did. Look at the contrast with the biblical story. After the duel with the magicians are able to then, they don't give up. They continue to be on the side of the Pharaoh, and they are able to replicate, I think, 2 or 3 miracles of Moses. The miracle, I think, of the frogs, or maybe the turning water into blood. I can't remember correctly precisely at the moment, but they are able to replicate, according to Exodus, some of the miracles of Moses. Even though what they're doing is not miracles, it's trickery, but they are able to, match Moses, at least to some extent. Not so in the Quran. Immediately, game over. The magicians, it has such a huge impact upon them. They are on their knees. They immediately, ask God forgiveness. And when the Pharaoh screams at them that, I'll punish you, I'll crucify you, whatnot, they say, we don't care, do what you like. That is the impact Moses' miracle has upon them. Wow. Now, if you look at the subsequent Jewish commentaries on this episode in Exodus, you can see that some authors are troubled by the fact that the magicians are able to replicate a few of the miracles of Moses. And different explanations are used to justify this. So, I won't go into the explanations in detail. I have them written down somewhere, but I'll get lost if I start reading them. But anyway, they give various explanations. And, some people say that, well, even though they are able to replicate what Moses did, but, Moses, the serpent, it was more ferocious, and it was able to, swallow up their snakes. But notice again how the Quran parts ways with the biblical story in a more drastic way. According to the Quran, no, they were defeated in that very instance, and that was end of story for them. And you come across these bits and pieces in so many other places in the story of Jesus. I've already mentioned the story of Zechariah. You look at the story of Joseph, and compare that with the parallels in the Bible. That again and again, at least I've come across these instances, which leads me to conclude that it's not correct to say that the Quran just endorses the Bible. I think the Quran has an adversarial attitude towards biblical traditions, both canonical and non-canonical. There are times when it agrees with what is there in the Bible and in biblical tradition, and at times when it disagrees with them rather drastically.
Yeah, I mean, this is extraordinary what you're saying. You give detailed evidence that still many Christian apologists, polemicists particularly, insist that the Quran endorses the Bible when it patently, obviously, doesn't. When you really look at the detail and comparatively, the intertextual analysis, you see as you say, an adversarial or polemical attitude, a correction, a change. But my own personal favorite, which I know you deal with in your thesis, is Surah Al-Ikhlas, 112th Surah. And my own favorite translation is Muhammad Assad's, a great Jewish convert to Islam in the 20th century, his commentary on and translation of the Quran. And it's very, very brief, this surah. In his translation, it says, "Say he is the one God, God the eternal, the uncaused cause of all being. He begets not, and neither is he begotten, and there is nothing that could be compared with him." So in four short ayah, we have what you have termed precision theology, but both in terms of confirming the Shema in the first verse, which is, hear Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, universalizing it, dropping, as you put it, the reference to Israel. and then also in the third verse, he begets not, neither is begotten. There's got to be a specific reference there to the Council of Nicaea, the idea of the Son begotten of the Father. So you have, on the one hand, the Quran affirming the Shema, which is in Deuteronomy, of course, the Creed of Israel, still recited today by pious Jews, of course, also reaffirmed by Jesus in the Christian Gospels, in the Gospel of Mark, and the Quran takes the side of Jesus and Moses, if we put it that way, over against the later Christian tradition, which would have Jesus as begotten of God. So for me, it's a very, not just precision theology, it's incredibly rich theology, which centers the Quranic perspective very much in the Jewish Mosaic tradition, which Jesus identifies with, according to Mark, over against another religion, which was not established by Jesus, as scholars now know in the West. He didn't come to establish Christianity. This later Catholic tradition of the creeds and the councils of the church, which are accepted by all mainstream Catholics and Anglicans and the Orthodox and Methodists and so on. They all accept these creeds as authoritative, at least the Nicene Creed anyway. That is discontinuous from the Mosaic, Jesus, Mohammedan, Quranic tradition. So for me, this is an incredibly rich surah, which speaks volumes on many levels about this. And I know you've written in your thesis about it. I don't mean to steal work there, but I just wanted to highlight that.
No, absolutely. And I have just one confession to make. The term which I used, precision strike, I borrowed that from a scholar. I can't remember her name, but she was giving a presentation and it stuck in my mind. So if I remember her name later on, I'll definitely mention it to give credit where it's due. And before,
in other contexts, I've credited it to you, and I will continue to credit it to you because that's where I read it in your thesis at Oxford. So, I think that for me is, a really weighty matter. I mean, the detail of Moses' hand coming out white and disease, that's there and tells us things. But this surah is the bombshell of all bombshells. I mean, it really.
No, absolutely, Amazing. I have a comparison with the Nicene Creed, which you might be able to. You won't be able to see. So like you mentioned, Qul huwallahu ahad, say He is God one. Now the word ahad here is a hapax legomenon, so it occurs only once in the entire Quranic corpus, only here. Otherwise, the word for one is wahid, which the Quran uses, but ahad is used here. And then if you compare that, with the Shema, here where Israel, the Lord our God is one, the word is ahad. So you can immediately, when you are reading Qul huwallahu ahad, if you know Hebrew, ahad will remind you of the Shema. Here where Israel, our Lord our God is one, ahad. And also, notice that the biblical statement, hear, O Israel, can be looked upon as a passive, whereas the Quran says, Qul huwallahu ahad. Qul is an imperative. Say He is God the one. So you can see that the Shema is actually intensified here. It's no longer about hearing, it's about declaring, it's about saying, it's about asserting. And then Allahu Samad, which can be translated as God the Eternal. Now you compare this with the Nicene Creed, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth and of all things visible and invisible. Okay, so we can say that this would match with God the Eternal. But the next crucial bit, who has not begotten nor has been begotten. Now, this stands in contrast specifically, very, very strongly with the Nicene Creed, where we read, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, begotten of the Father, before all worlds or eons, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made. So there is a very precise refutation of this in a few words in the Quran, and there is no equal to Him. And the relevant bit in the Nicene Creed, being of one substance with the Father. So the Quran is, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. who has not been begotten nor has been begotten. There is no equal to him. How precisely the Quran, refutes the notions to be found in the Nicene Creed, and like you said, at the same time, affirming or intensifying the Shema.
And this is bad news, though, surely, for some people who, in a misguided sense, perhaps of interfaith, let's get along together, all religions lead equally to God. We all have our own partial view of the truth. Qur'an here is asserting absolutely the categorical absoluteness of God, that he's not begotten, not made, and that none can be compared to him. So it really is, it's laying down the line here and saying, no, this is the truth, and this is the truth that Moses taught, that Jesus affirmed as well, over against other formulations which do have God begetting or making other beings, in that fashion. So the ultimately is not going to be joining hands, singing Kumbaya in a kind of a way that's very fashionable in many religious circles in the West. It asserts this absolute truth in a very uncompromising way. As you say in the first surah, cool, as you fascinatingly said, is an imperative. Say, not just hear, proclaim that he is the one God, the Shema. So it's uncompromising, so I'm trying to say. And that is just the nature of truth. Metaphysical truth is absolute for the Quran, and it can't be negotiated with. It's asserting itself without any compromise.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I am all in support of interreligious dialogues, but there is no doubt that the Quran has its truth claims, and it has taken very precise positions on particular issues, and one has to deal with that.
I mean, I don't mean to. Yes, I do think that dialogue is very good, but this kind of facile sense of there are certain groups I'm aware, weren't mentioned by name, who do have this kind of where you kind of overlook these issues and will pretend basically we'll all believe the same thing, and that the Quran is very clear that it stakes the truth very clearly there.
Yes.
Okay, well, we've been on air for just over 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm also very conscious that you've hardly scratched the surface, and because there's so much more you could have said and can be said about any of these subjects. The historical Jesus, the historical Muhammad, and intertextuality is a new bit of jargon there. We're all going to have to learn, I suppose, if we're going to appear knowledgeable about these things. Just to conclude then, Usman, if you have something you just want to share with us, and then we'll perhaps call it a day.
No further thoughts. I can just thank you for having me here again, and I look forward to our next discussion. Thank you.
Wow, there's a promise there for further installments. No, that's excellent. I think what we're going to have to do is chop up this video. I don't mean this video will go out unedited, but I will create 3 separate videos because there are 3 subjects that can be more easily digested in bite-sized portions, I think. So we'll have 4 videos from this at least.
Cool.
And people I know from TikTok tend to grab extracts as well, which is great because it's spread the knowledge, spread the truth. Anyway, Usman Sheikh, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And I look forward to you're going on presumably to do your PhD, hopefully at Oxford.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. I need to send out my application and look into a few things, but after getting my results, I'm very motivated to proceed with it.
Absolutely, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you again on Blogging Theology to share your knowledge with the viewers. So thank you very much. Until
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. See you. Bye.